Welcome, everyone. We will go ahead and get started in 2 minutes. Vamos a comenzar en 2 minutos. Hay traducción simultánea. Si necesitas usarlo, there's simultaneous translation. If you would like to use that, it's at the bottom of your screen. I'll explain it all in just 2 minutes while we wait for folks to join. Good afternoon and good evening.
Aquí que esto no prende. Primera que me hago el bombillo.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 27th consecutive monthly picket action, US-Canada hands off Venezuela, end all sanctions on Venezuela, and free Alex Saab. Before we get started, I wanted to let folks know that we have a simultaneous interpretation for tonight's online picket action. You can listen in English or in Spanish. To listen in English, press the globe icon at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on a cell phone, go to the 3 dots and click More for interpretation, and then choose to listen in English. If you'd like, si quieres participar anoche en el idioma de español,
if you want to choose your interpretation channel.
Hay interpretación para la acción en línea de esta noche. Para escuchar en español, presione el icono de globo en su pantalla de computadora, teléfono, y elija español. Gracias a Julieta y Laura por su apoyo.
For their support in translation.
Thank you again to everyone for joining tonight, whether you are coming, as I see, from the Philippines, from Africa, from Canada, from Venezuela, or from anywhere across Latin America. Please do feel free to participate in the chat and let us know where you are joining from, and share any other information you'd like to with folks. Today, we are broadcasting the event from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, which is the traditional and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Musqueam, and Squamish Coast Salish nations. My name is Allison Bodine. I am the coordinator of Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice, Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, as well as the author of the book, Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Venezuela, from Battle of Ideas Press. And it is my pleasure to be with you here tonight. We have a very excellent panel of speakers at tonight's webinar, which has been organized, webinar and picket action, which has been organized by the Venezuela Peace Committee in Winnipeg, Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice, Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, and Just Peace Advocates. with the support of Venezuela solidarity organizations and individuals across Canada. On May 10th, 2023, 21 members of US Congress sent a letter to US President Biden calling for the lifting of all sanctions against both Cuba and Venezuela. In part, the letter states, quote, "While ending these indiscriminate economic sanctions regimes is an indispensable part of addressing the migrant crisis, there are also strong moral grounds for their elimination." This letter strengthens the actions and organizing of people in the US and Canada against the US blockade, sanctions, and attacks on Venezuela, and in defense of Venezuela's self-determination and sovereignty. It is also a further call to action for us to increase our efforts to demand an immediate lifting of all blockade and sanctions against Venezuela and freedom for Alex Saab, whose case is closely tied, of course, to the ongoing attacks against Venezuela. This month's virtual picket action will include updates about the case of Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab and how we can unite to fight for his freedom. Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab, just to let everyone know who may not know, is unjustly held in a Miami jail and has been held whether in Miami or in Cape Verde under house arrest for over 1,000 days for his work to provide food, medicines, and fuel to the people of Venezuela to help alleviate the impact of criminal US sanctions, which we'll hear more about today. We'll also be discussing the US government's recent seizure of the US-based Venezuelan oil company Citgo and other important aspects of the ongoing attacks against Venezuela by the US government and its allies, including the government of Canada, where I'm speaking from today. So everyone, we have all joined to add our voice to demand freedom for Alex Saab and to defend Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination. And I'm really looking forward to an excellent program, panel of speakers, followed, of course, by greetings from folks across Canada who have joined, as well as our group photo at the end of the action. To start us off, I want to invite WILMER Armando Depablos, who is a lawyer, a diplomat, and an international affairs analyst who's currently working together with the Free Alex Saab Movement in Venezuela. WILMER is joining us from Caracas today. Welcome, WILMER. The floor is all yours. We could hear you before, we can't hear you now, but if you'd like to start speaking. Oh, the audio is disconnected. Okay. So WILMER, somehow your audio has disconnected. We will work to figure that out. You might have to leave and then come back again to make that work. So I think what we are going to have to do, unless that worked. Looks like somehow it is still disconnected. I think you will have to leave the event and then come back again. Okay, so I will work to try and diagnose that with WILMER and introduce our next speaker. We'll go ahead and change around the order a bit, which is actually going to be CAMILA Escalante, who is a Canadian journalist and news correspondent reporting in Latin America. CAMILA has been really great to meet you, whether here in Canada, in Venezuela, or on the ground. Probably most recently, we saw each other in Nicaragua. and has been dedicated to launching a new important news website, Kawsachun News, which I encourage people to visit and support. And Camilla, I hope after you're done, you'll post all the social media and everything in the chat for folks. But if you want to go ahead and start us off while we figure out some audio with Wilmer, that would be great. Welcome.
Thank you guys for having me, Allison, and everyone else who is putting in the time to organize and do tech. So I wanted to discuss on recommendation of Allison some of the important things that are going on right now today, in fact, this week in Brazil that, President Nicolas Maduro and the Bolivarian government have participated in. But first I'll list some of the, the important contributions of Nicaragua to our region and as sort of leaders for all anti-imperialist movements in Latin America. First of all, Venezuela has been a proponent of South American integration, and that's what I'll end with speaking about is the events this week, but also a proponent of integration of the whole of Latin America and the Caribbean. And despite all of the attacks on Venezuela, has really maintained really important diplomatic relations with a lot of countries, both which have a lot in common ideologically, but others that don't. The Bolivarian government has maintained important and close relations with Caribbean governments, particularly those five Eastern Caribbean states that are members of ALBA TCP, as well as other members of CARICOM, the Caribbean community. And that has been really important in trying to bridge the sort of language gap, the cultural gap, whatever sort of distance that exists between countries that are Spanish speaking on the one hand and the Caribbean governments on the other hand. You'll have noticed, especially in recent years, that it has been CARICOM states that have been going to their CARICOM summit, but also speaking internationally, such as at the UN General Assembly, demanding the lifting of unilateral coercive measures on Venezuela and Cuba, and particularly thanking the Bolivarian government, going back to Chavez, for instituting the Petrocaribe program, which has benefited many Caribbean states, and which these Caribbean governments and people are now demanding in light of the situation overseas with the Russian special military operation and the conflict in Ukraine, the way in which has been very difficult for these Caribbean economies to recover since the pandemic, and now with the world economic situation. They have really been asking for the help of Venezuela and demanding that the United States, and in other cases, the other countries of Europe and Canada, lift these unilateral coercive measures in order to allow the full economic recovery of the country so that Venezuela can participate normally economically and with trade with other countries, and so that it can lend a hand, as it has in so many different instances, to the different countries of our region. It's also been a leader in bridging relations between the American continent and the rest of the global South. At the height of this sanctions war and the media smear campaign against Venezuela, the Bolivarian government maintained really important relations with other members of OPEC, with countries of Africa and the Arab world, and of course with Asia, most importantly with China and Russia and Iran. And has been a leader in solidarity in that regard when those countries were subject to imperialist attacks, and also, of course, a leader in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Also, in recent years, we've seen solidarity among the peoples in Latin America and the Caribbean, whether it was sharing COVID supplies with St. Vincent and the Grenadines, or in Brazil, where Venezuela offered support in the form of oxygen when then President Jair Bolsonaro denied oxygen to hospitals in Manaus. Venezuela showed up despite that very hostile relationship between the two countries, in which relations had really broken down, and made a donation. Venezuela has also used Conviasa, its state airline, to help with the transport of medical supplies and even personnel from Cuba to other countries. And it has maintained and defended the 2014 SELAC Declaration of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace amid hostile attacks by the United States, which utilized the neighboring territories of Colombia, of Brazil, where we know that under Macri, they were doing military exercises with the idea of potentially having some sort of operation against Venezuela. And of course, the US has also used international waters in the Atlantic or Caribbean Sea in order to bully Venezuela and threatening, of course, some sort of military intervention. Venezuela has been a leader in completely rejecting the militarization of our continent, and also the presence of NATO, as is represented by Southcom, around Latin America. And it's also been, of course, a categorical and principled voice rejecting unilateral coercive measures, not only when it's been applied to Venezuela itself and its close friends Cuba and Nicaragua, but has also categorically rejected sanctions imposed illegally on 36 or more countries around the world, including Belarus, including Iran, including Syria, Zimbabwe, and many other countries. This week, of course, President Nicolas Maduro arrived in Brasilia on Sunday night to participate in this meeting of presidents, 11 presidents of South America, that was convened by Lula. And President Lula and Maduro, of course, have the same sort of vision and the same sort of call, that despite all of the sort of perceived or real ideological differences between countries like Chile and Venezuela, that it's very important that given the urgent circumstances that we find ourselves in, both in the region and the world, that it's important to come together and work on some shared issues: the economy, health, energy, infrastructure, the Amazon, the environment in general, and ending poverty, among many other issues. President Maduro had a very lengthy and important agenda with President Lula on Monday, where they had several meetings, both private meetings, but also extended cabinet meetings with many high-ranking ministers and officials, both vice presidents of both countries. And it marks a very important restoration or advancement in the process of the complete normalization and restoration of political ties between the two countries, which, of course, a process which began on January 1st, when President Maduro's government was present at the inauguration of Lula. But they are reopening embassies, sending back ambassadors to the two countries, in a stark difference between the previous very hostile relationship between Venezuela and Brazil under Jair Bolsonaro. It's a very important step forward, that they're going to be able to jointly address the issues of the environment, of indigenous peoples, protecting the rights of indigenous peoples jointly, and the Amazon, and also tackle the issues that exist along the border, including transnational crime, but also look for ways to jointly develop infrastructure and many other issues. So it's been a very important week, and of course, President Nicolas Maduro throughout this whole period has been a very important leader when, this region lacked a lot of leadership, in light of some of the electoral defeats when countries such as Argentina and Ecuador and Colombia some years ago were all governed by right-wing governments. So I'll end there. And again, thank you so much for including me in today's Picket.
Thanks, Camilla. I know a lot of these events are still developing, but it's great to have the initial kind of idea of what's happening in these important connections that are taking place between Venezuela and other Latin American countries. Of course, we had the restoration of diplomatic relations with Colombia, and I think many other countries are moving in the direction of building a stronger, again, alternative to US hegemony in Latin America. And Venezuela, as you mentioned at the beginning, is really a crux of this anti-imperialist struggle, one that as people in North America, Canada, the United States, we have to recognize how important Venezuela's solidarity is in that regard, and defending Venezuela's sovereignty and independence and self-determination is a boost and can be a big boost to not only other progressive governments fighting for the same thing, but also to social movements across Latin America that are fighting against US imperialism attacks, sanctions, blockades. So thanks for bringing us that context to today's Picket action. We also just wanted to ask if you could please put all the information for how to continue to follow your work, how to stay on top of the important news that you've been sharing into the chat, so folks who aren't already connected that way can be connected with Kawsachun News and everything else that you're doing to give the perspective of Latin America, oftentimes in English, in a platform that not a lot of people come across. We're both speaking here from Canada, so I can say for sure that the CBC, Canada's main broadcasting company, is a big spreader of lies and misinformation, and really the demonization campaign against Venezuela and other independent countries that are standing up to the United States and Canada's criminal foreign policy in Latin America, especially. So thanks for your time. So we do have Wilmer, his audio, I think, is connected. Milaniela, your audio is not connected yet, so we're going to continue to kind of troubleshoot that. But Wilmer, if you are ready, it would be great to hear from you, from your perspective. Again, Wilmer is a lawyer, a diplomat, and an international affairs analyst with the Free Alex Saab movement in Venezuela, and has brought that perspective to the campaign for freedom for Alex Saab, a political prisoner, Venezuelan diplomat currently held in US jails. So Wilmer, the floor is yours. Wilmer Depablos, welcome. Now you're on mute, but that is an easier issue than before.
Aplaudir esta iniciativa, darle las gracias.
I wanted to congratulate you for this initiative. Thank you for the invitation, and also I wanted to celebrate the gender balance here, because women have always been the majority here. And of course, I wanted to use this beautiful language that we have, which is Spanish, or Castilian, as it's called in our constitution, because as new banks or currencies are born with a new system in the world, well, the old languages will be having a new position in the global south, because Chinese and Spanish are the most spoken languages, and we have to share them because the world is changing in many aspects, and even in the aspect related to language. So of course that today we are seeing all around the world a change from a multipolar world for a unipolar world. And also, I'm sorry, his audio is really breaking up. So we are.
Wilmer,
I'm
one
sorry.
second. 1 second. I'm going to turn off your video so maybe the audio quality becomes better. 1 second.
En este sentido, es
So
importante.
in this sense, it's important to highlight that this event today between Brazil and Venezuela that is happening right now has threatened the hegemony around the world of the dollar, because they are speaking about a global south currency, and of course we are speaking about the this mechanism that led Venezuela to be facing sanctions, which got us to use people such as Alex Saab to bring medicine and food to our country. So Alex Saab was not a spontaneous phenomenon. It's not just about a simple commercial transaction. Alex Saab is the result, the product of an alliance and the cooperation and the humanity of a business person that understood that Venezuela had to be helped at a very crucial moment. So it's no coincidence that we are raising the flag of free Alex Saab right now.
Wilmer, I don't know if you can hear me. Your audio is not working anymore.
Te oigo, Alison.
Yes, I can hear you, Alison.
Oh, okay. Excelente.
Perfecto.
Okay. But you are done for now?
¿Puedo continuar?
Okay, sí, please.
Dale, perfecto. Les estaba diciendo que por supuesto.
So as I was saying, of course, what is happening at the moment in the South Cone is the result of the clash of those two models. One of them is being defeated. And of course, the sanctions today are being threatened, given the fact that the American hegemony is seeing that the BRICS currency is about to be issued. So their maneuvering space is becoming restricted. So this is why journalists over the world are attacking Lula, and they were asking, why are you threatened by this currency? Well, because we know that the monopoly of information works through communication, through misinformation, to attack this phenomenon, this phenomenal proposal, which is this BRICS currency that is being developed by Dilma in Shanghai, a currency that can be based on gold. And you know that Venezuela holds the 5th reservoir of gold. So Venezuela would be positioned at a very high level on the ranking, given their cryptocurrency and their new currency. And this would mean a threat, because there wouldn't be any more Alex Saabs, and there wouldn't be any more manipulation on their part.
Wilmer, I think the audio cut out again. It'll probably come back. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. With international webinars connecting to Venezuela and other countries, sometimes there are audio and video issues, as we know. Okay. So I think, Wilmer, we will, if you have some concluding remarks, we can try and get you connected again in a few minutes, but we'll go on to our next speaker for today and see if we can get a stronger internet connection. Our next speaker for today is someone that is always joining us for these past 27 months. Professor Luis Acuña is the Charge d'Affaires of the Venezuelan Embassy in Canada. He is a former Minister of Higher Education in Venezuela and former elected governor of the state of Sucre in Venezuela. And he continues to give his support not only to the Solidarity movement by participating in these webinars and being available for our organizing, but also his important work as a charge d'affaires from within Venezuela as a sign of the continued disintegration of relations between the government of Canada and the democratically elected government of President Nicolas Maduro on the part of the government of Canada. So as solidarity activists who stand with Venezuela, we are all, eager and hoping to really increase our organizing in light of, especially of the fact that the so-called government of so-called interim President Juan Guaido has fallen apart into pieces. But we see governments like the United States and Canada continuing to prop it up. And so we will have Professor Luis Acuña give some comments, and then, yeah, Camila, if you want to join with some commentary afterwards, that'd be great too. So Professor Luis Acuña, so good to see you today. Welcome. The floor is yours for anything you would like to share with people gathered here today for Hands Off Venezuela and Free Alex Saab.
Hello, Alison. Hello, everybody. I want to thank you again, Alison. This is the 27th in a row webinar in favor of the Venezuelan people. It's a very important work that you and all the team that, go with this work do for us. And we are really very, very, pleased that we have people who help us. As a matter of fact, I want to thank Camila Escalante, and also to Wilmer DePablo by the information regarding the invitation that Presidente Maduro received from Presidente Lula. We are at this moment dealing with the recomposition of the government relations between Venezuela and Brazil that were lost because in the government of Presidente Bolsonaro. Same thing that happened in Colombia with Presidente Duque, same thing that happens in Chile, in Argentina, in Ecuador, in Peru. But one thing that we want that people know is that we lost the connection with the governments, but we never lost the connection with the people. And the people of Venezuela and the people of Brazil, keep connections every day with the Colombian. We have millions of Colombians living in Venezuela, and we have many Venezuelans who went to Colombia, Peru, Argentina, Brazil, looking for work because the sanctions, kept all the industry in Venezuela, closed, and people need to work. And that connection was never lost. We are trying to reconnect with the governments, but we are connected with the people. Same thing that happened with Canada. We are not able to connect with the government of Canada, but we connect with the people of Canada. The better example is this webinar. We are talking with the people of Canada and the people of the world because you are helping us to do that. So this important information that Camila and Wilmer gave us today speaks about what Venezuela is doing. Venezuela have been invited to join the BRICS. That is a very, very important thing that happens, because if that happens, Venezuela will be able to go, around the sanctions and be able to do business in the world, because we won't need the dollar to do that. Things that are happening today in the US, Citgo, the government of Canada wants to steal Citgo. It's not that want to do any other thing that steal that very, very important company. And the government of the United States. We have to keep working on that. And one of the examples of the things that we keep going is with the defense of Alex Saab. We know that the situation of Alex Saab is not because this or that, that's a political situation that we will have to solve politically. It's not a matter of the judge or whatever happens between the recognition of the United States of the status of Alex Saab as a diplomat. What we need is to solve that politically, and that will happen. I mean, that won't keep forever. That has been happening many, many years. The US, I know, that do that. So this webinar, Alison, helps people from Venezuela and people from Canada and people from the US to know what's going on. As a matter of fact, if you need a political analyst in some subjects, like, for example, Citgo or the BRICS, I can advise who could help us, joining the webinar at any moment in the future. I am, very happy to help. I mean, that this webinar is able to send information, the real information, to the people of Canada and the people of, all the ones that join us every month in the webinar, and that has been joining us for 27 months in a row. So today I just want to thank you, thank Camila, thanks Wilmer, thanks Milaniela and Julieta, because they are helping us with the translation in Spanish and English for this webinar to be able to be, joined for people, even though they don't speak Spanish or they don't speak English. Thanks. I want to inform you that we have to to stop issuing passports in the embassy, because we need to put in Canada the new machine of SAIME, and we are in the process. We don't know when we will be able to do that. As you know, it's not easy to send things diplomatically to Canada. That is almost impossible, or for Canada to send diplomatic information or bags to Venezuela. But we will solve that, and the Venezuelans who live in Canada will be able to keep having their passport issued and renewed. So thanks, Alison. And inform you that we are having a very, very bad weather here in Venezuela, and probably that's the reason why Wilmer was not able to join us. Thanks again.
Thank you, Professor Luis Acuña. Yes, it is, I think, coming on the rainy season in Venezuela, which can make it difficult for connections. So thank you for always being with us. I know that it's not always easy with everything that you have to do in a day, but for making the time to be with us, to give your perspective. We will definitely take you up on the offer. It'd be great to hear more about the significance of US-led attacks on Venezuela when it comes to Citgo, or the seizure of the possible seizure of the Boeing airplane from Argentina. There are very significant thefts by the United States government, which is taking resources out of the government of Venezuela, away from the hands of people in Venezuela, and giving them to multinational corporations, giving them to the so-called government of Juan Guaido. And I think it's very important we continue as part of our campaign in defense of Venezuela to make sure people understand, what it means. $2 billion in gold held by the Bank of England, Venezuelan gold. What could that buy in medicines, fuel, foods, if Venezuela was able to use that for the development of people in Venezuela, for programs like CLAP that distribute subsidized, a basic food basket, food and medicines to people in Venezuela. And thanks again also for always expressing your support for Alex Saab. We were able to connect with Wilmer. I don't know, Wilmer, if you want to try and give any closing remarks. You are not muted, so you can jump in if you'd like. But Milaniela has not been able to join. I think she's still trying, but it hasn't worked out yet. So on behalf of the Free Alex Saab movement, I just really want to thank everyone for the Free Alex Saab movement for their constant support of the monthly picket actions and of Freedom for Alex Saab because of how significant his case is. The US government's really working to make it an example where they can once again say to the world, the US doesn't have to follow international law. We make our own rules. We can kidnap people from third countries, as they did in the case of Alex Saab. We can lock them away in jail with trumped up charges, and do this as a way to really threaten any country, any of the 1/3 of the world that is sanctioned by the United States, from really trading with one another without the interference of the United States. And that's why it's such a threat to hear to the US government's policies, to hear about discussions between Brazil and Venezuela, about Venezuela joining BRICS, about building ALBA, or all of the other south to south, as they call them, trade agreements that cut out and cut through US hegemony. So I will take a minute. If folks have noticed, Babette in the chat. Thank you, Babette, for posting in the chat from the Racine Peace Group in Wisconsin, also a Cuba Solidarity and Venezuela Solidarity organizer in Wisconsin, which is in the United States, has brought up that the Wisconsin Coalition to Normalize Relations with Cuba, Peace Action Wisconsin, the Latin American Solidarity Committee, has joined in the postcard campaign that we launched a few webinars ago, the Free Alex Saab postcard campaign to US President Joe Biden. This postcard is been taken up by groups around the world, but especially the United States, folks in Canada, who've started to distribute them as a way to both educate people about sanctions and blockade against Venezuela and the important work of Alex Saab, as well as to put pressure on the US government and President Joe Biden to release Alex Saab immediately. As it states on the back, Venezuela has been facing brutal sanctions imposed by the United States. These sanctions are responsible for at least 40,000 deaths from 2017 to 2018, as found by the Center for Economic and Policy Research. And during the pandemic, sanctions have made shortages of medical supplies and other necessities even more critical. Goes on to describe the case of Alex Saab, who was illegally extracted by the US from Cape Verde, bypassing his diplomatic immunity, and is currently being unjustly held in a Miami jail. His legal case, which we were going to get some of an update on today, is still in an appeal process, which means it's a critical time for us to mobilize support, especially in the United States, for Alex Saab. So by joining the postcard campaign, Mike Larson here from Fire This Time Venezuela Solidarity Campaign is going to be posting in the chat how to join the postcard campaign. You can get them in the mail. We'll give you as many as you think you can distribute, and then send them on and encourage folks to send them on to the White House. For more information, it's going to be in the chat, but for anyone else, I'll just say it out loud. You can email the Fire This Time Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, which is FTT Venezuela Solidarity @gmail.com to join the Free Alex Saab postcard campaign and really unite our voices by flooding the White House with these postcards. So get a copy, get more than one, get many copies. And thank you, Babette, for explaining to people how they can be used, how they are can be part of any event that you're helping to organize, and a great tool to really reach out to folks and say, support Alex Saab, send a postcard to Biden. So I think ultimately, Milanela, let's see one more time if she's going to be connected here. Doesn't look like quite yet. So we'll go. Yeah, sure.
Roy is in the chat and he was saying if he could speak.
Oh, sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Oh, I see you put his hand up. Okay, we will go ahead and promote Roy Lopez, who's also with the Free Alex Saab Movement and a social media expert. While he joins and gives us an update on the case, I'll just encourage people to copy down that email from the chat and join the postcard campaign. And then we'll go on to our next section of greetings. But Roy, thank you for stepping up on short notice. And it's very good, as always, to see you. Welcome.
Hola, saludos a todos.
Hello, everyone.
Gracias, Alison,
And thank you, Alison, for all these months of organizing things, this great activity to support the Bolivarian Revolution, to support Venezuela, to support the Venezuelan people. From here, from Caracas and from all over in Venezuela, part of the Free Alex Saab Movement, I want to send you a big hug and a very important and gratitude for the large work that you're doing. I wanted to say that we are just a couple of days away from the 12th, that is to say 2 weeks, or 12th of June, 2 or 3 weeks. On June the 12th, it will be 3 years from the kidnapping of Alex Saab, from that terrible June the 12th, 2020, when he was going to the Republic of Iran to make a work asked by President Nicolás Maduro that he had been complying with. And of course, imperialism had realized of the important task that Alex was conducting, and that's why they decided to make this unfair and inhumane kidnap. For that week, for the week of June the 12th, we will be conducting activities both in Venezuela and in different parts of the world. We have an important event in Caracas on the 14th, 16th, and 15th and 16th. There will be more than 50 guests from different parts of the world, even from Cape Verde. And for this last year and a half that Alex Saab has been quarreling and struggling from a political and from a juridical point of view, they've supported us in giving us legal advice together with the organization of the people of Cape Verde, as well as people from Africa, from Asia, from the US, from Canada, and from the rest of the continent that will be joining us in order to continue discussing, continue knowing which are the new actions that will be taken to continue our fight.
Luis Acuña.
As Professor Luis Acuña was saying before,
Una salida que tiene que ser, bueno,
it's,
negociada, una salida.
I mean, the way out has to be negotiated. It's a political way out, what we have to achieve. So that's it. I just want to thank Camila as well. And thank you, Camila, for always being there to support us with our cause, for supporting with your work, which is also making news and launching the news. And WILMER Depablos, who is working throughout Venezuela, conducting a lot of events together with the Socialist Party, the governors and the mayors, bringing the voice of Alex Saab and denouncing his kidnap. So thank you again, and thanks, Professor Luis Acuña, because you're always participating, always present in these events.
Los que van a venir.
So, and that's it for all those who are going to come to Caracas in 2 weeks. I'm waiting, expecting to see you all here, see your faces here, and continue with our struggle. Free Alex Saab, thank you all, and hands off Venezuela.
Free Alex
Thank
Saab.
you.
Thank you, Roy, for joining us today and sharing about that important event. Where not only within Caracas and in Venezuela we will be coming together, but I hope and understand that actions will be taking place around the world in support of Alex Saab on this horrible anniversary of Alex Saab's initial arrest, but one that we must take to heart and use to help build our united campaign for freedom for Alex Saab. So before we go to our group photo, there are a few folks that had wanted to join with some messages of support and solidarity at tonight's picket action. The first I'm going to prepare is from Aidan Jonah. Aidan is the editor of the Canada Files, which is an important anti-imperialist media organization and publication here in Canada. So I'm going to bring up a video from Aidan, who wanted to send it on to our picket action here today. Sorry, I think I need to click one more button here. Okay.
Hello there, this is Aidan Jonah, Editor-in-Chief of the Canada Files. We are a socialist, anti-imperialist news organization that focuses on investigations and analysis of Canadian foreign policy, and we have been doing this since November of 2019. So, to all the folks that are attending here at this picket organized by Fire This Time and many other social movements, we applaud you. And also, give some special applause to one of the speakers, CAMILA ESCALANTE, who is the host of the Canada Files Speakers Series. All in all, I know you folks are going to be talking about the freedom of Alex Saab, and that is a terrific cause. It is truly critical that this diplomat is freed from the effective kidnapping that happened by the United States government. Its impunity must be challenged, and we must fight this, and we must fight for a better Canadian foreign policy, and we should support the fight in the U.S. for a less violent foreign policy, and we should fight for an end to U.S. and Canadian imperialism. So if you folks want to check out the work of the Canada Files, it'd be thecanadafiles.com. Social media, just search us up, The Canada Files. Thanks, folks. Have a great time.
So that was a message from Aidan Jonah with the Canada Files. Thank you, Aidan. Next, we have Arnold August, who is here to give a greeting from the International Manifesto Group and some more reflection. Arnold was recently in Venezuela and has not shared everything yet. So Arnold, it's great to have you here this afternoon. Welcome. Sorry, Arnold, you are on mute.
So thank you very much for having me, and Greetings to everyone, panelists, of course, once again to LUIS via internet until that day comes when you will be back in Ottawa. I'm confident it's going to happen one of these days. Like Venezuela, I think someone mentioned Venezuela has just been proposed to be a member of the BRICS. And of course, President Maduro accepted it very proudly in a modest way. So despite all of the sanctions against Venezuela, like, you know, some new statistics just came out that after United States, which has 438 different sanctions against Venezuela, guess which country is second? Canada, with 108. So we in Canada, we have a very special responsibility to call out the Trudeau government for its activities without let up since Trudeau was elected, at the same time as Trump, by the way, against Venezuela. But Venezuela is holding its own. Like when I was there in Venezuela, my 5th trip in March, beginning of March, on the issue of Alex Saab, it's not just a question of you know, his family or the government or the organizations, the legal organizations who are fighting for his freedom, but it is a national cause. Venezuela is famous for taking up national, very controversial issues as a national cause. One is Palestine. It's one of the few countries in the world where Palestine is considered to be a national cause for the Venezuelan people. And now it's Alex Saab. So people have to, I suggest that they follow the example and use the postcard campaign and any other campaign that is being used to increase the pressure so that he is finally released and sent back to his family. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arnold, for your support and for joining and for your continued writing. People can follow Arnold August on social media platforms and follow his analysis, especially in regards to what is taking place in Venezuela and Cuba today and the impact this has on internationally on a growing movement of independent countries that are, like we've been talking a lot about today, fighting really against United States hegemony in the world. And that's been a valuable, Arnold's contributions are a valuable part of the tools that we need in order to build a broader and more united, a stronger Venezuela solidarity movement side by side with people in Venezuela, so many of whom have joined us today or have spoke today and every day are fighting against US blockade and sanctions and for freedom of Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab. We have one more greeting, but I also had a request from our co-fighters in Code Pink to share about an upcoming delegation organized by Code Pink and the Task Force on the Americas. From August 1st to 13th, 2023, they are organizing a delegation to learn about Venezuela and Venezuela's socialist communes. And you can get more information about this on their website. I'll be putting a link in the chat shortly and encourage folks, if you know anyone who has not been to Venezuela yet, you have not been, this would be an excellent way to go and see Venezuela for yourself and really learn so much about what is happening in Venezuela despite the criminal US sanctions and blockade, and really also hopefully make more connections with others across North America to coordinate and to really put our actions together, to unite our actions, unite our voice. So there's more information there about this upcoming delegation to Venezuela. Link will be in the chat shortly. And I will go ahead and invite up Janine Solanki. Janine Solanki is from the Executive of Mobilization Against War and Occupation, Vancouver, Canada's anti-war coalition. Welcome, Janine.
Hello, everyone. It's great to hear and see you all every month. It's so wonderful to be together online with people from not just where I am here in Vancouver and locally across Canada, but also throughout the US, in Venezuela, and many other parts of the world. So a big thanks to the organizers for bringing us together. And I wanted to say a few words because just last week, the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, presented a report that singled out Venezuela, along with Cuba, Iran, North Korea, and Syria, for, quote, not cooperating fully with the United States anti-terrorism efforts, end quote. And of course, Venezuela very correctly responded, reaffirming Venezuela's efforts towards peace and criticizing the United States for these unfounded, politically motivated, and completely hypocritical accusations. And I think anyone with any degree of sense and understanding of who the United States is and what they're doing around the world can just see how absolutely hypocritical and baseless that accusation and that report is. We know who the real terrorist is. The people of Venezuela know the truth when they've faced years, decades of US terrorism with crippling and inhumane sanctions, with US orchestrated coups, the backing of dangerous mercenary and counter-revolutionary forces in Venezuela, and of course, as has been talked about today, the kidnapping of one of Venezuela's diplomats, Alex Saab. But we can look farther too. Pretty much all around the world, in every corner of the world, people have faced US terrorism. The people of Iraq recently marked 20 years since the brutal so-called shock and awe US-led invasion, and 20 years of war and occupation, which killed over 1 million people and left 10 million people as refugees and displaced people. The people of Afghanistan know US terrorism through over 20 years of suffering that brutal war. We also recently marked 8 years of the Saudi-led US-backed, US and Canada-backed and armed war on Yemen, which has resulted in what the United Nations calls the world's worst humanitarian crisis. And we, can look everywhere around the world and throughout the last many decades. We know we are here today because we know that. We know the United States is a force of terrorism, and we know that Venezuela is a force of peace. And we're here today to stand in solidarity with Venezuela to demand, and myself here on behalf of Mobilization Against War and Occupation, to demand the self-determination for all oppressed nations, whether it be Yemen, Palestine, indigenous nations, Cuba, and of course for Venezuela, and demanding an end to US-Canada sanctions on Venezuela and for hands-off Venezuela. So let's continue coming together here and defending the Bolivarian Revolution and Venezuela as a force for peace and against terrorism. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine, for that context, important context as well. Unfortunately, with the US President Biden administration and that of Antony Blinken, also, of course, here with the continued administration in Canada of Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland, we are seeing very absolutely no opening of normalization of relations between the democratically elected government of Venezuela and that of Canada or the United States, despite we started today's Picket talking about this important letter from US members of Congress, elected members of Congress, 21 of them, demanding that all sanctions against Venezuela and Cuba be lifted. But the response of the Biden administration has been one that is very in support of continued blockade and sanctions and support of further attacks against the basic human rights of people in Venezuela. And I think we have to really think of ways to continue organizing and to increase our campaigns in solidarity with the people of Venezuela, because it is clear that despite some cracks in some of the the leaders in the United States, some cracks in the ruling class of the US government who have some differences about sanctions. The overarching dominant view continues to be one of increasing pressure on people in order to bring about dissent, in order to overthrow the democratically elected government of Venezuela and reverse the gains of the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela. So if we could go ahead, sorry, we need to remove someone. Mike, if you could do that. Okay. If we could go ahead and get ready for our photo. It's time. I'm gonna, as people may not be used to it, there's some new folks here. We do take a group photo at the end of all of our online picket actions for Free Alex Saab and Hands Off Venezuela. So you'll receive an invitation, a pop-up message, either on your phone under the More or on your computer screen, asking if you'd like to join the webinar as a panelist. So if you say yes, you will then be able to join the webinar and turn on your camera and join us in our final chanting and photos. As people begin to get those invitations, I'm going to share about one more upcoming event. We were going to have with us today, we've just had some bad luck with technology, it seems, Salako Coyote from Nigeria, who is an organizer with the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign in Nigeria, because he wanted to announce about an upcoming event, which I'll go ahead and announce here. And so from the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign in Nigeria, they are going to be having a conference and discussion about Alex Saab demanding his freedom on Saturday, the 10th of June, 2023. That is 3 p.m. Nigeria time, which is 7 a.m. Vancouver time or 10 a.m. Caracas or East Coast time. The Zoom will be available. We'll send it out and encourage folks to attend. A great lineup of speakers, an important call for freedom for Alex Saab coming from the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign in Nigeria. And we hope to hear from Coyote in a future month and a future webinar. Folks should have started receiving the invitations. And so you'll get the message, you can say, yes, I'd like to join. If you haven't gotten one yet and you want to join, then please raise your hand and then we can find you faster. But I also will remind folks again, as we're receiving invitations, the Free Alex Saab postcard campaign, send us an email, fttvenezuelasolidarity@gmail.com, and you can go ahead and get your postcards in the mail, and that will enable you to distribute them at events, to talk to folks about the case of Alex Saab, and then say, hey, put a stamp on it, send it to the White House. Let's flood this White House with postcards. Also, Babette, if folks didn't catch it earlier, did put a link as well to a radio show, an online radio show that you can access, where they're talking about the case of Alex Saab. So I encourage people to take a listen to that and share that around as well. Some more folks wanting invitations, we'll go ahead and do that. We'll do one more round, and then we'll do some chanting together. It's really great to see all of you here today and to see your faces and your determination to continue the fight for Alex Saab, to continue the fight for lifting all sanctions and blockade against Venezuela, which folks in Venezuela are constantly being denied their basic human rights due to the criminal policies of the United States government. And then Alex Saab has been, you know, as a Venezuelan, a diplomat, as a believer in the right of his people to sovereignty and self-determination, really put himself out there in order to promote trade between sanctions countries, in order to give Venezuelans access to food and medicine and fuel, and has been put in jail in the United States as an example to everyone around the world, that if you violate the laws of the United States, which are not the international laws and not the laws of people of the world, then you will be punished. So let's unite our voices. Folks should be able to unmute themselves. We're going to do some chanting together. If anyone has not received an invitation and you would like to join the webinar with your camera and participate in the photo, then I will send out some final invitations here. Oh, there's some more requests. Thank you all. And we'll turn off the interpretation so we can all chant in one united voice. Oh, here's another one. Anyone else like an invitation? Please raise your hand or write your name in the chat. Looks like we are doing excellent here. It's really great to see you all. Thanks to those that made signs. If you weren't able to make a sign, no worries. You don't need a t-shirt. You don't need a sign. Just your face, a fist, peace sign. We're all good. Okay. I'm going to turn off interpretation. Interpretation, I think, is off. Oh, actually, Mike, I think you need to turn off interpretation. Down at the bottom of the screen. All right. There we are. So all together, free Alex Saab.
Free Alex Saab.
Free Alex
Saab. Free Alex Saab.
Free Alex Saab.
Alex
Saab.
Free Alex Saab.
Hands off Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
We have Yuri from one on YouTube. Bye.
Gracias.
All right. Beautiful faces, all of you. United, we will win.
Thank you,
Alex Saab. Lift all sanctions to blockade on Venezuela. We'll see you at the nenext online ticket and out in the streets for Alex Saab on June 16th.
Venceremos.
Venceremos. We will win.